There are certain stretches of asphalt across America that seem to exist outside the ordinary rules of the world. Roads where the veil between the living and the dead grows thin, where tragedy has soaked into the very pavement, and where travelers report encounters that defy all rational explanation. Tonight, we journey down these haunted highways, exploring the documented deaths, the chilling legends, and the unexplained phenomena that have earned these roads their terrifying reputations. The headlights of your car cut through darkness that seems somehow thicker here. The radio crackles with static, and somewhere in the distance, or perhaps just behind you, something is watching, waiting, remembering the blood that was spilled on this very road. In the northern reaches of New Jersey, tucked away in the wooded wilderness of Passaic County, there exists a road that has earned the distinction of being called the most haunted in America. Clinton Road stretches approximately 10 miles through West Milford, a narrow two-lane highway that receives little maintenance and connects two areas of minimal population. During the day, it appears unremarkable, perhaps even pleasant, with its surrounding forests and the occasional glimpse of water from the nearby reservoir. But when darkness falls, Clinton Road reveals its true nature. The road itself gets its name from the original settlement of Clinton, which was located near where the road crosses a small brook. For centuries, this isolated stretch of pavement has accumulated stories of the strange and the terrifying. The surrounding property consists largely of undeveloped, publicly owned woodlands, either part of the City of Newark watershed or state forest. There are very few houses along the road, which only adds to its sense of desolation. As one local police chief put it, the road is a long, desolate stretch that makes the imagination go nuts. Perhaps the most famous legend associated with Clinton Road involves a young boy whose spirit is said to haunt the area near a stone bridge that crosses a small stream. According to the tale, if you stop your car at the bridge around midnight and toss a coin into the water below, the ghost of the boy will throw it back to you. Some versions of the story claim the boy drowned in the water beneath the bridge. Others say he was killed in an accident along the road. Whatever the origin, countless visitors over the years have tested the legend, and many have returned with stories of coins mysteriously appearing on the road beside their parked cars, or of small wet handprints appearing on their vehicles where no living child could have reached. The bridge itself sits near a sharp turn in the road that locals have long called Dead Man's Curve. This treacherous bend has been the site of numerous accidents over the decades, including one that has spawned its own spectral legend. In 1988, a young woman driving a blue Chevrolet Camaro lost control of her vehicle on this very curve. She slammed into the cement divider with such force that she was killed instantly. Since that night, drivers traveling Clinton Road have reported seeing the ghost of a young woman in a blue Camaro, her spectral vehicle appearing from nowhere to chase them down the darkened road before vanishing just as mysteriously as it appeared. There are stranger tales still. Some visitors claim to have encountered park rangers in the forests near Clinton Road, official-looking figures in uniform who approached their campsites to check on them. The interaction seemed perfectly normal until the witnesses later learned that the men they described, down to specific physical details, matched rangers who had died in the area back in 1939. The ghostly rangers apparently continue their patrols decades after their deaths, unable or unwilling to abandon their duty to protect the wilderness they served. Just off Clinton Road, to the east of the reservoir, stands a conical stone structure that has inspired its own sinister legends. Visitors unfamiliar with the area's history have claimed this building was a Druid temple, a site where dark rituals were practiced. and where terrible consequences awaited any intruder who arrived at the wrong moment. The truth is somewhat less supernatural, but no less interesting. The structure is actually an iron smelter built in 1826, listed on the National Register of Historic Places as Clinton Furnace. The smelter processed ore from local mines during the early industrial era. Today, it stands fenced off by the Newark Water Department, but that has not stopped the legends from growing around it like weeds, transforming a piece of industrial history into something far more menacing in the popular imagination. The isolation of Clinton Road has made it attractive to those seeking privacy for activities that cannot bear the light of day. Over the years, law enforcement has investigated reports of gatherings in the surrounding forests, groups congregating for purposes that range from the merely strange to the potentially dangerous. Some of these accounts involve what appear to be cult meetings or ritualistic activities. Others speak of Ku Klux Klan gatherings in the dark of night, robed figures illuminated by firelight. Whether these reports reflect actual events or simply the overactive imaginations of visitors primed by the road's reputation, they have added layers to the legend, creating an atmosphere where almost anything seems possible once the sun sets. But legends and folklore are one thing. What sets Clinton Road apart from other allegedly haunted thoroughfares is that it has been the site of documented, real-world horror. On May 18, 1983, a cyclist riding down Clinton Road through the wooded area spotted something that would change the road's history forever. There, partially hidden in the underbrush near the shoulder, was a human body being eaten by a turkey vulture. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community and launched an investigation that would eventually expose one of the most prolific contract killers in American history. When medical examiners conducted their autopsy, they discovered something deeply disturbing. The victim's body showed clear signs of murder, but the decomposition patterns were strange, almost impossible. The skin showed advanced decay, yet the internal organs near the heart were remarkably well preserved. The answer came when investigators found ice crystals in the blood vessels around the heart. Someone had frozen the body after death, storing it for an extended period, before dumping it on Clinton Road. The victim was identified as Daniel Deppner. The investigation that followed eventually led authorities to Richard Kuklinski, a man who would become known as the Iceman. Kuklinski was a contract killer who claimed to have murdered over 100 people during his criminal career, though law enforcement could only definitively prove 5 murders. His method of freezing bodies to confuse the time of death earned him his chilling nickname. Whether Kuklinski knew of Clinton Road's sinister reputation when he chose it as a dumping ground remains unknown, but the discovery added a layer of genuine, documented horror to a road already thick with ghostly legends. The darkness of Clinton Road extends beyond its bridges and curves. Deep in the surrounding forest stand the ruins of what was once known as Cross Castle. Built in 1905 by a man named Richard Cross for his family, the stone structure eventually fell into disrepair after a fire and was subsequently demolished for safety reasons. Only the foundation and remnants of the basement remain. But according to local legend, before its destruction, the castle became a gathering place for those drawn to darker pursuits. Visitors report that the walls of the basement were covered with satanic scripture, and that no entrance to this section seemed to exist in the original structure. Whether truth or fabrication, stories persist of devil worship, dark rituals, and malevolent energies that still cling to the site where the castle once stood. Then there is the phantom truck. This particular legend centers on a man who allegedly lived along Clinton Road decades ago, a violent and territorial individual who viewed the road as his personal domain. According to the story, this man would chase away any vehicle he spotted traveling toward his property, pursuing them in his black pickup truck until they fled back to the main roads. When the man died, his property sat abandoned for years, but his territorial nature apparently survived his passing. Drivers on Clinton Road at night have reported headlights appearing in their rearview mirrors, a truck that seems to gain on them no matter how fast they drive. The phantom vehicle pursues them relentlessly until they reach the end of the road, at which point it simply vanishes into the darkness. The tales do not end there. Clinton Road runs near the former site of Jungle Habitat, an animal theme park that operated in the 1970s before closing due to financial difficulties and safety concerns. When the park shut down, rumors spread that some of the exotic animals had escaped or been released into the surrounding wilderness. This gave rise to stories of strange hybrid creatures lurking in the forests along Clinton Road, unidentifiable beasts that have been spotted crossing the road at night, or watching from the shadows between the trees. The road also features what may be the longest traffic light wait in the country. Where Clinton Road crosses Route 23, a double intersection creates a traffic signal that can force motorists to wait for 5 minutes or more. Sitting alone in the darkness, engine idling, surrounded by the black forest on either side, even the most skeptical driver might find their mind wandering to thoughts of what might be watching them from just beyond the reach of their headlights. Southwest of Chicago, cutting through the suburb of Justice and the surrounding communities, runs a stretch of road that has earned the title of most haunted in the city, perhaps in the entire Midwest. Archer Avenue began its existence as a Native American trail, a path worn into the landscape by countless feet over countless years. The road follows a route that connects several cemeteries, which may explain why it seems to attract so many spirits, or perhaps there is something about the land itself, something that reaches back to times before European settlement, that creates a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead. The most famous ghost to haunt Archer Avenue is a young woman known as Resurrection Mary. Her story has been told and retold for nearly a century, passed down through generations of Chicago families, investigated by researchers and paranormal enthusiasts, and experienced firsthand by dozens of witnesses whose accounts share remarkably consistent details. According to the legend, Mary was a young woman who spent an evening dancing at the O. Henry Ballroom, now known as the Willowbrook Ballroom, sometime in the late 1920s or early 1930s. After getting into an argument with her boyfriend, she stormed out of the ballroom and began walking home along Archer Avenue. The night was dark, the road poorly lit, and tragedy struck. Mary was hit by a passing vehicle in what was either a fatal accident or a deliberate hit and run. Her parents, devastated by the loss, buried her in Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, dressed in the beautiful white dancing dress and shoes she had worn that final night. But Mary, it seems, was not ready to rest. Since the 1930s, men driving along Archer Avenue between the cemetery and the ballroom have reported encountering a young woman on the side of the road. She is described as young, probably in her early 20s, with light blonde hair and blue eyes. She wears a white party dress, dancing shoes, and sometimes a thin shawl. She carries a small clutch purse and speaks very little, if at all. The first documented encounter came in 1939 when a man named Jerry Paulus met a mysterious young woman at a dance hall. They spent the evening dancing together, and Jerry later recalled that her hands were as cold as ice, though he reasoned she must simply have a warm heart. When the night ended, he offered to drive her home. She gave him an address on the south side of the city, but then asked to be taken to Archer Avenue instead. When they reached Resurrection Cemetery, she asked to be let out. Before Jerry could respond, she vanished before his eyes, disappearing into the cemetery gates. The next day, Jerry went to the address she had given him. When Mary's mother answered the door, she told him that her daughter had been dead for 5 years. In the decades since, the encounters have continued. Drivers have picked up the pale young woman in white, only to have her vanish from the back seat as they pass the cemetery gates. Taxi drivers have stopped for a fare only to watch her disappear before she can enter the cab. In 1976, a passing motorist noticed a young woman standing inside the cemetery gates, gripping the bars as if trying to escape. When police investigated, they found that 2 of the iron bars had been bent apart, and embedded in the metal were the marks of 2 small hands, as if someone had gripped them with such force that the iron itself had yielded. The bars were eventually removed and replaced, but photographs of the original damage still circulate among those who study the legend. The sightings have continued into the modern era. In 1979, a cab driver reported picking up a young woman in a white dress who simply vanished from his back seat before they reached Resurrection Cemetery. A year later, in 1980, a couple named Claire and Mark Rudnicki were driving down Archer Avenue when they spotted a woman in a white gown walking slowly on the side of the road. The figure appeared translucent, they claimed, surrounded by a glowing white aura. When they turned their vehicle around to investigate, she had vanished completely. In 1989, Janet Kalal and a friend were driving near the cemetery when a woman in white appeared directly in front of their car. Janet had no time to react and struck the woman, or so she thought. There was no impact, no sound, and no body. The figure had simply disappeared at the moment of what should have been collision. Researchers and paranormal investigators have spent decades trying to identify the woman behind the legend. 2 names appear most frequently in their investigations. Mary Bregovi was a young Polish-American woman who died in a car accident in downtown Chicago in March of 1934. She was 21 years old and is buried in Resurrection Cemetery. Her blonde hair and youth match witness descriptions, though the location of her fatal accident, in the Loop rather than on Archer Avenue, raises questions about how she became connected to the road. Anna Norkus, sometimes called Maria, died in a car accident on Harlem Avenue in 1927 while returning from the O. Henry Ballroom. Her death occurred closer to the location associated with the legend, though some details of her story do not align perfectly with the ghost's described behavior and appearance. Perhaps Resurrection Mary is not any single person, but a composite, a spectral representation of all the young women who died too soon in that era, their tragedies merging into a single iconic figure. Or perhaps she exists independent of historical records, a phenomenon that transcends documentation and explanation. Whatever the truth, her sightings continue to this day, and her fame has spread far beyond Chicago, making her arguably the most famous vanishing hitchhiker ghost in American folklore. But Resurrection Mary is not the only ghost to walk Archer Avenue. The stretch of road between Resurrection Cemetery and St. James, Sag Church, is considered particularly active with paranormal phenomena. Ghostly monks have been seen wandering the grounds around St. James, Sag, their hooded figures moving through the darkness before fading from view. At Sacred Heart Cemetery, witnesses have reported seeing what they call the Gray Baby, a small spectral figure that manifests near the graves of the very young. Perhaps most disturbing is the phantom hearse that has been spotted tearing down Archer Avenue and through the cemeteries at impossible speeds. Witnesses describe a black coach made of oak and glass, pulled by wild-eyed horses that seem driven by some invisible terror. Inside the glass walls of the hearse, they can see a small coffin, the final vessel of a child taken too soon. The origins of this spectral funeral procession remain unknown, though some theorize it may be connected to Resurrection Mary herself, the hearse that carried her body to its final rest, now condemned to repeat its journey through eternity. The area around Archer Avenue has also been the site of documented tragedies that seem to feed the road's haunted reputation. Car accidents, drownings, and other fatal incidents have occurred with disturbing frequency along this stretch of road over the decades. Some locals believe that the concentration of cemeteries creates a kind of spiritual vortex, drawing both the living and the dead to this narrow corridor between Chicago and its suburbs. In the high desert of the American Southwest, cutting through the rugged wilderness of New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah, there once ran a highway whose very number seemed to mark it as cursed. Route 666, the designation assigned to this lonely stretch of road in 1926, earned the nickname the Devil's Highway almost immediately after its creation. For those who recognize the biblical significance of those 3 digits, the mark of the beast referenced in the book of Revelation, traveling this road meant tempting fate itself. The numbering was not intentional. The highway received its designation simply because it was the 6th branch off the main Route 66. But coincidence or not, the road seemed to embrace its infernal name. From the very beginning, Route 666 claimed lives at a rate that defied explanation. The New Mexico portion of the highway became particularly notorious for its death toll. With approximately 400 twisting curves packed into just 60 miles of roadway, the highway seemed designed to catch drivers unaware. One moment of inattention, one misjudged turn, and vehicles would go careening off into the desert or slamming into oncoming traffic. Between 1985 and 1992, 22 people were killed on Route 666. In 2001 alone, 15 died. In 2002, 11 more. The highway earned a place on lists of the 20 most dangerous roads in the United States, and for those who believed in the power of its number, the cause was obvious. The highway was damned. The devil had claimed it as his own, and anyone foolish enough to travel its length was gambling with their soul. The legends that grew around Route 666 reflected this belief in supernatural malevolence. Drivers reported encounters with phantom vehicles, particularly a sinister black sedan that would appear in their rearview mirrors, gaining on them no matter how fast they drove. The car seemed to materialize from nowhere and would pursue its victims relentlessly, sometimes forcing them off the road entirely. Those who survived such encounters described the vehicle as wrong somehow, its headlights too bright, its presence too aggressive, its driver never visible behind the windshield. Others reported seeing a girl in a white dress wandering along the roadside in the middle of the night, miles from any town or settlement. Some who stopped to offer help claimed she simply vanished as they approached. Others told more disturbing stories, of the girl appearing suddenly in their headlights, of the sickening thud of impact, and of finding no trace of any body when they emerged to investigate. The desert holds many secrets, and not all of them can be explained by the harsh environment or the tricks that heat and distance play on human perception. Truck drivers who regularly traveled Route 666 shared their own stories. Some spoke of an 18-wheeler that would appear behind them on long, straight stretches, its headlights growing larger in their mirrors, despite the impossibility of any vehicle catching up to their own speed. The phantom truck would tailgate them for miles before simply vanishing, leaving them shaken and questioning their own sanity. Others described their radios picking up strange transmissions, voices speaking in languages they could not identify, or static that seemed to form patterns too regular to be coincidental. Time itself seemed to behave strangely on Route 666. Drivers would set out on journeys that should have taken 2 hours and find themselves arriving 4 or 5 hours later, with no memory of where the additional time had gone. They would check their watches, their odometers, their fuel gauges, and find inexplicable discrepancies. Some experienced the opposite phenomenon, arriving at their destinations far sooner than possible given the distance traveled and their speed, as though the road had somehow shortened itself. These reports of temporal anomalies added to the sense that Route 666 existed partially outside the normal rules that govern the physical world. The Native American communities through which Route 666 passed contributed their own legends to the highway's dark reputation. The road runs near Shiprock, a dramatic volcanic rock formation considered sacred by the Navajo people. Some claimed that skinwalkers, shape-shifting entities from Navajo tradition, prowled the highway at night, taking the forms of animals or people to deceive and harm travelers. Drivers reported seeing figures that moved too quickly, that changed shape as they watched, that seemed to appear and disappear at will along the darkened roadsides. Mechanical failures plagued vehicles on Route 666 with suspicious frequency. Engines overheated for no apparent reason. Tires went flat on stretches of perfectly smooth pavement. Electrical systems failed, leaving drivers stranded in the desert darkness without lights or radio. Those of a supernatural bent blamed the road's cursed nature. More pragmatic observers pointed to the harsh desert environment and the highway's remote location, far from service stations or cell phone coverage. By 2003, the accumulated weight of tragedy and legend had become too much. The governors of New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah successfully petitioned to have the highway renamed. Route 666 became Route 491, and the devil, symbolically at least, was cast out. At the renaming ceremony, the New Mexico Secretary of Transportation declared, "The devil's out of here, and we say goodbye and good riddance." But the change in name did not immediately change the road's nature. In the 2 months following the renaming, 6 more people died in accidents on the highway. It took years of infrastructure improvements, road widening, and safety enhancements before the fatality rate began to decline significantly. Today, Route 491 is considered no more dangerous than any other rural highway in the region. But the legends persist. Locals still refer to it as the Devil's Highway, and some still refuse to travel it after dark, no matter what number appears on the signs. Not far from Clinton Road, in the rolling hills of Warren County, New Jersey, another road has earned a name that sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. Shades of Death Road winds approximately 7 miles through Liberty, Independence, and Alamuchee townships, passing through dense forests, past a mysterious lake, and along stretches where the trees grow so thick overhead that the sun barely penetrates even at midday. The road runs alongside Jenny Jump State Forest and has accumulated legends as dark as its canopy. The exact origin of the road's ominous name has been lost to history, though several theories persist. One explanation traces the name to the area's geography. The low-hanging trees that line the road create a natural canopy of shade, and in the early days of settlement, the great meadows through which the road passes was a vast, marshy swampland. This swamp bred mosquitoes in enormous numbers, and those mosquitoes carried malaria. Beginning in the 1850s, annual outbreaks of the disease claimed lives with terrible regularity. The combination of the road's natural darkness and the death toll from disease gave rise to the name Shades of Death. Another theory centers on the criminal element that once inhabited the area. According to this version of history, the original inhabitants of the region surrounding the road were an unruly band of squatters and bandits. The dense forests and sharp curves created perfect ambush points for highwaymen who would waylay travelers, rob them of their possessions, and often leave them dead on the roadside. Men from this vile gang would get into fights over women and money, conflicts that frequently ended with one or both participants losing their lives. When the civilized world finally pushed these outlaws from their territory, the name they had given their stronghold remained attached to the road that wound through it. A third theory suggests that the locals eventually took matters into their own hands regarding the highwaymen. In this version of the story, the citizens grew tired of the robberies and murders and began capturing the bandits. Rather than turn them over to distant authorities, they dispensed frontier justice on the spot, lynching the criminals and leaving their bodies hanging from the low branches that overhung the road as a warning to others who might consider a life of crime. The swinging corpses in the shade gave the road its macabre name. What is documented is that during the 1920s and 1930s, at least 3 brutal murders occurred on or near Shades of Death Road. In one incident, a man was bludgeoned to death with a tire jack during a robbery motivated by gold coins he carried. In another, a local resident named Bill Cummins was shot and buried in a mud pile near his home. The murder was never solved. But perhaps the most gruesome involved a woman who murdered her husband, decapitated him, and buried his head on one side of the road and his body on the other. Just off the road, in the forest south of the Interstate 80 overpass, lies a body of water that the locals call Ghost Lake. The lake was created in the early 20th century when 2 wealthy men dammed a creek that ran through the narrow valley between their properties. They gave it its name because of the wraith-like vapor formations they often witnessed rising from the water on cool mornings. They named the pass between their homes Haunted Hollow. Visitors to Ghost Lake report experiences that seem to justify its name. No matter what time of night they arrive, the sky above the lake always seems brighter than it should be, as if perpetually caught in the twilight between day and night. Strange mists rise from the water and drift between the trees in formations that look unnervingly like human figures. Across the lake from the road sits a small abandoned cabin, and those who have approached it report feelings of intense unease, sudden drops in temperature, and the sense of being watched by something unseen. Some claim to have seen apparitions through the cabin's windows, shadowy forms that move behind the glass despite the structure's obvious abandonment. Near Ghost Lake lies a small cave that was once used by the Lenape people, the Native American tribe that inhabited this region before European settlement. Some visitors have reported seeing the ghost of a Lenape chief near the cave entrance, a watchful spirit guarding the sacred spaces of his ancestors. The cave itself is now largely covered in graffiti, its significance diminished by modern vandalism. But some believe the spiritual presence remains, undiminished by the disrespect shown to its physical location. The animals of Shades of Death Road have earned their own frightening reputation. Stories circulate of vicious wildcats that prowl the forests, attacking travelers who venture too far from their vehicles. Whether these represent actual predator populations, escaped or released exotic animals, or something more supernatural is unclear. What is clear is that the dense forests on either side of the road harbor more than just trees and undergrowth. Something lives in those shadows, something that watches the cars pass by and waits for those foolish enough to stop. The road itself presents genuine physical dangers beyond any supernatural threats. Sharp curves and narrow shoulders claim victims with disturbing regularity. Reflective guardrails along certain sections mark the spots where fatal accidents have occurred, silent memorials to those who underestimated the road's treacherous nature. At night, the canopy of trees blocks out starlight and moonlight, creating darkness so complete that headlights seem barely adequate to pierce it. In this darkness, the imagination fills in what the eyes cannot see, and what it fills in is rarely comforting. Further down Shades of Death Road lies an unpaved lane called Lenape Lane, named for the Native American tribe that once inhabited the region. About halfway down this lane sits a wooden structure that resembles an abandoned stable. Visitors who have explored this site at night report extremely localized fog that seems to surround only the structure itself, even when the rest of the area is clear. Some have seen apparitions inside the stable, figures that watch them from the shadows. Others have reported a ball of white light that appears at the end of the road and chases vehicles back toward Shades of Death Road. According to legend, if the orb turns red during the chase, those who witness it will die. In the southwest corner of Ohio, where Route 222 meets Route 125 in Claremont County, there exists a stretch of road that locals have called Dead Man's Curve for nearly 2 centuries. The intersection, located between the towns of Amelia and Bethel in the village of Bantam, has been claiming lives since before the automobile was invented. The road's deadly reputation dates back to 1831, when this stretch of pavement was part of the Ohio Turnpike. In those days, the road was designed with a sharp curve at the top of a hill, a configuration that proved treacherous for horses and carriages. When vehicles crested the hill at any significant speed, the sudden curve caught them off guard. Horses lost their footing. Carriages slipped on wet cobblestones or muddy dirt. Vehicles rolled over and tumbled down the hillside, killing drivers and passengers alike. The death toll mounted year after year, and the name Dead Man's Curve became permanently attached to the location. The highway remained a 2-lane road until 1968, when it was straightened and widened to 4 lanes. The dangerous curve was eliminated, and local officials celebrated with a ribbon-cutting ceremony to mark the end of Dead Man's Curve. They believed they had finally conquered the stretch of road that had claimed so many lives. Their celebration was premature. Just 1 month later, on October 19th, 1969, 5 teenagers were driving along the newly straightened highway in a 1968 Chevrolet Impala. From the opposite direction came a 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner, traveling at an estimated 100 miles per hour. The vehicles collided at the intersection with devastating force. Of the 5 teenagers in the Impala, only 1 survived. The driver of the Roadrunner also died in the impact. In the decades since that tragedy, approximately 70 additional people have lost their lives at or near the intersection of routes 222 and 125. The new configuration of the road did not end the dying, and for many locals, this confirmed what they had always suspected. The curse was not in the road's design. It was in the land itself, or perhaps in something that dwelt there, something that hungered for the lives of travelers. After the 1969 accident, a new legend emerged. Drivers traveling through the intersection late at night, particularly between the hours of 1:20 and 1:40 in the morning, the estimated time of the crash, began reporting encounters with a mysterious hitchhiker. The figure stands on the side of the road, apparently waiting for a ride. Those who have gotten close enough to see details report something deeply disturbing. The hitchhiker has no face. Where features should be, there is only blackness, a void where eyes, nose, and mouth should exist. Some drivers report seeing the faceless figure in the middle of the road, directly in their headlights. They slam on their brakes, certain they are about to hit a pedestrian, only to pass through empty air. Others have described the figure chasing their vehicles after they pass, sometimes throwing rocks at their cars, sometimes simply pursuing them at impossible speeds until they escape the area around the intersection. There are also reports of a green roadrunner appearing in the rearview mirrors of drivers at the intersection, the same make and model as the vehicle that caused the 1969 accident. The phantom car gains on its victims, its single working headlight bearing down on them before vanishing as mysteriously as it appeared. Whether this represents the ghost of the actual vehicle or some manifestation of the tragedy itself, no one can say. The sole survivor of the 1969 crash, a man named Rick, reportedly saw the faceless hitchhiker 5 times over the years following the accident. Whether guilt, trauma, or something genuinely supernatural drew these encounters, his experiences suggest that whoever or whatever haunts Dead Man's Curve has a particular connection to those involved in the tragedy that cemented its modern legend. Local residents who have lived near the intersection for decades share stories passed down through their families. One account describes a gruesome accident from an earlier era, a collision so violent that a man's head was severed from his body. According to this tale, when police arrived at the scene, they witnessed something horrifying. A dog was carrying the severed head away from the wreckage, disappearing into the darkness before anyone could stop it. The head was never recovered. Some believe that the faceless hitchhiker is this victim, still searching for the missing part of himself, his features erased because they were literally taken from him on that bloody night. Others report more mundane but equally unsettling experiences. Cars approach the intersection and suddenly find their headlights flickering, their engines sputtering, their electrical systems behaving erratically. Radios switch stations on their own or emit static that sounds almost like voices. Some drivers report being pelted by rocks from an unseen source while passing through the area, stones clattering against their windows and doors without any visible thrower. Whether these represent supernatural activity or simply the high concentration of strange coincidences that seem to cluster around notorious locations, they contribute to Dead Man's Curve's reputation as a place where the normal rules do not apply. The current configuration of the intersection continues to claim lives despite the improvements made decades ago. Emergency responders in the area know the intersection by its nickname and approach calls there with the understanding that they may be facing something more than a typical traffic accident. Some speak quietly of cases where the circumstances simply did not add up, where the evidence at the scene did not match the damage to the vehicles, where witnesses described events that seemed physically impossible. These stories rarely make it into official reports, but they circulate among those who work the area, adding to the mythology of a place that seems determined to maintain its deadly legacy. In the forests of central Wisconsin, not far from the city of Stevens Point, there runs an isolated dirt road that has become the source of one of the state's most persistent and disturbing legends. Boy Scout Lane stretches for about 2,500 feet through dense woodland, a narrow passage barely wide enough for a single vehicle. The road was once owned by the Boy Scouts of America, who planned to build a camp on the property. Although the camp was never constructed and the land remains undeveloped, the name stuck, and with it came a story that has haunted the imaginations of Wisconsin residents for decades. According to the legend, sometime in the 1950s or 1960s, a troop of Boy Scouts went camping in the forest along this road. What happened next varies depending on who tells the story. In some versions, the scoutmaster went insane and murdered all of the boys under his care, hanging some from trees and leaving others scattered through the woods. In other versions, it was the bus driver who committed the massacre. Still other tellings blame a forest fire started when the scouts accidentally dropped their lantern, the flames spreading too quickly for the boys to escape. Some stories claim the scouts simply vanished, wandering into the forest and never returning. Their bodies never found, despite extensive searches. The truth is that there is no historical record of any such tragedy occurring on Boy Scout Lane. No newspaper accounts from the era describe the murder of a scout troop. No missing persons reports match the timeline of the legend. The Boy Scouts of America have no record of any such incident. By all measurable evidence, the story is pure folklore, a campfire tale that took root and grew over the decades. And yet the reports of strange activity continue. Visitors to Boy Scout Lane at night describe an overwhelming sense of foreboding, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. They hear footsteps in the underbrush, the crack of breaking branches coming from multiple directions, as if they are surrounded by invisible figures moving through the darkness. Some report seeing lights in the forest that resemble lanterns or flashlights, bobbing between the trees as if carried by small figures searching for something lost. The lights appear and disappear without explanation, impossible to approach or investigate. For those who believe the version of the story in which the scoutmaster killed himself after murdering the boys, there is the shadow that sometimes appears near an elm tree along the road. The silhouette of a body seems to hang from the branches, swaying gently in a breeze that does not seem to blow elsewhere. It is visible for only moments before fading from view. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports of childlike handprints appearing on vehicles that stop or drive slowly through the area. Visitors have returned to their cars to find small palm prints pressed into the dust or grime on their windows and doors, prints too small to have been made by any adult, appearing in places no living child could have reached while they were watching their vehicle. The land surrounding Boy Scout Lane is now privately owned and posted with no trespassing signs. Whether this is to protect the property from the curious seekers who arrive looking for ghosts, or to protect those seekers from whatever truly haunts these woods, the signs do little to deter those drawn by the legend. They come in the darkness, these explorers of the unknown, hoping to catch a glimpse of the lantern lights, or hear the footsteps of lost children moving through the trees. Some leave disappointed, others leave shaken, convinced that something in those woods remembers the tragedy that the historical record cannot confirm. Those who have walked Boy Scout Lane describe an atmosphere that defies easy explanation. The air feels heavier there, they say, as if the forest itself is pressing down on anyone who enters. Sound behaves strangely, with noises that should be close, sounding distant, and distant sounds arriving with unnatural clarity. Some visitors report hearing children's laughter echoing through the trees, playful at first, but growing more unsettling as it continues, as if the unseen children are not playing games but testing the reactions of the living, watching to see who will run and who will stay. The spectral bus appears in some accounts, a vehicle that should not exist on this narrow, unpaved road. It rolls out of the darkness without warning, its headlights washing over parked cars, its engine rumbling but producing no exhaust. Those who see it describe a sense of profound wrongness, a conviction that the vehicle is not truly there in any physical sense, but exists as a memory burned into the landscape, replaying endlessly for those unlucky enough to witness it. The bus passes by and continues into the darkness, never reaching a destination, never stopping, never acknowledging the terrified observers who watch it pass. Some visitors speak of encountering the Scoutmaster himself, the murderous figure from the most disturbing version of the legend. They describe a tall shadow moving between the trees, always at the edge of vision, never quite visible enough to identify but always undeniably present. The shadow watches. The shadow follows. The shadow seems to be waiting for something, though what it waits for and whether that waiting will ever end, no one can say. Those who have felt its presence describe an overwhelming urge to flee, a primal terror that transcends rational thought and speaks directly to the survival instincts buried deep in the human brain. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources maintains the area surrounding Boy Scout Lane, but rangers and officials tend to avoid discussing the legends associated with the road. Whether this reflects professional skepticism, a desire to discourage trespassing on private property, or genuine unease about what might lurk in those woods, their silence only adds to the mystery. Questions about Boy Scout Lane are met with deflection or dismissal, as if the subject itself carries some kind of contamination that officials prefer not to risk. Running through the Denver suburb of Thornton, Colorado, connecting the city with Brighton to the north, lies an 11-mile stretch of road that has earned nicknames like the Gates of Hell and America's Most Haunted Highway. Riverdale Road passes through both busy intersections and rural areas where farmland and open space create a sense of isolation that seems impossible so close to a major metropolitan area. The heart of Riverdale Road's haunted reputation centers on a story of madness and murder. According to local legend, a wealthy man once built a grand mansion along the road. Some versions of the story place the construction in the 1860s, while others claim it occurred in the 1970s. Whatever the timeline, the tale follows a similar arc. The man who built the mansion slowly lost his grip on sanity. One night, consumed by madness, he murdered his wife and children before setting the house ablaze. He himself disappeared into the night and was never seen again. The gates that once marked the entrance to his property still stand along Riverdale Road, rusted iron sentinels guarding the ruins of a home that no longer exists. Research into the historical record reveals that there was indeed a fire at a mansion on Riverdale Road. The David Wolpert House, believed to have been built in the 1860s by an early Colorado settler, was destroyed by fire in November 1975. However, the circumstances were far less dramatic than the legend suggests. By the time of the fire, the house had been abandoned and boarded up after being declared a fire hazard by county health authorities. No one was living in the home when it burned. No family was murdered. The fire was likely caused by vandals who had been trespassing on the abandoned property. But the legend has a power that transcends historical accuracy. The rusted gates remain standing, and those who pass through them report feelings of profound unease. Some claim to see the apparition of a woman in white walking the road near the gates, searching for something or someone. She is described as confused, lost, unable to find her way home, or perhaps unable to accept that her home no longer exists. Beyond the gates, other haunted encounters have been reported along Riverdale Road. There is the phantom jogger who appears on a section of the road known as Jogger's Hill. According to the legend, a young boy once walked this stretch of road daily on his way to school. One day, he was struck and killed by a passing vehicle. Now his ghost appears to drivers at night, running alongside their cars, his footsteps audible, his form visible in their peripheral vision. Some say that if you allow the jogger to approach your driver's side window, you will hear his heartbeat, and that to hear it means death. There is also the Phantom Camaro, a vehicle from the 1970s that appears behind drivers on Riverdale Road at night. According to the story, the driver of this car was racing down the road years ago when he lost control on one of the many blind curves. The crash was fatal, but the driver's restless spirit continues to race the road, challenging other drivers to join him in his eternal speed run. The phantom car has only one working headlight, making it distinctive even before its supernatural nature becomes apparent. The Colorado Department of Transportation has confirmed that several fatal accidents have occurred on Riverdale Road in recent years. Between January 2021 and September 2022, 5 people died in crashes along this 11-mile stretch. Whether these accidents are the result of the road's design, driver error, or something more sinister, the death toll continues to grow, adding new potential spirits to the road's already crowded population of ghosts. Some locals speak of Native American shapeshifters that roam the land through which Riverdale Road passes. Others describe an underground chicken coop where strange writing was found on the walls, suggesting that the mansion builder conducted rituals to conjure spirits. Still others report seeing figures hanging from trees near the South Platte River, which runs parallel to the road for much of its length, remnants perhaps of vigilante justice meted out in the area's violent past. Paranormal investigators have flocked to Riverdale Road over the years, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural activity that locals describe. Some have recorded unexplained voices on their equipment, whispered words that seem to come from nowhere, and respond to questions asked in the darkness. Others have photographed strange lights and orbs moving through the air where no natural light source could explain them. Still, others have measured significant temperature drops in specific locations along the road, cold spots that persist regardless of weather conditions or time of year. The Denver Ghost Hunters, a group that has conducted multiple investigations of Riverdale Road, describe specific locations where energy seems to concentrate. One investigator reported standing on the west side of the road and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, a conviction that something was about to attack her. When she moved to the east side of the road, just a few feet away, the feeling vanished completely. This pattern has repeated with other visitors, suggesting that whatever presence haunts Riverdale Road may be confined to specific areas, watching from invisible boundaries that the living cannot see but can sometimes sense. Local police receive occasional calls about unusual activity on Riverdale Road, though most reports turn out to be teenagers exploring the legends or visitors who have let the atmosphere overwhelm their judgment. The Thornton Police Department has noted that despite the urban legends surrounding the road, they have not found evidence to substantiate claims of genuinely paranormal activity, However, they also acknowledge that something about Riverdale Road generates these persistent stories, something that year after year draws people to drive its length after dark, searching for proof of what so many claim to have experienced. The original gates that stood at the entrance to the mansion property have become a destination for those seeking the heart of Riverdale Road's haunted reputation. Though the mansion itself is long gone, the gates remain, rusting slowly in the Colorado air, standing guard over nothing but empty land and accumulated memory. Visitors often stop at these gates to take photographs, hoping to capture something otherworldly on their cameras. Some claim the photographs reveal faces in the metalwork, figures standing behind the bars, shadows that were not visible when the picture was taken, but appeared in the developed image. Cutting diagonally across Arizona, connecting Phoenix with Las Vegas, runs a stretch of US Highway 93 that has earned a nickname no road wants. Blood Alley refers to the approximately 200 miles of highway that wind through the desert between Wickenburg and Kingman, a route that has consistently appeared on lists of America's most dangerous roads for decades. The statistics are sobering. A study analyzing accident data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration identified 70 fatal accidents on the Arizona portion of US 93 between 2010 and 2016 alone. In 2020, 9 people died in crashes along the stretch between Wickenburg and Wickiup. The following year, that number rose to at least 13. The highway earned its place as the most dangerous in the United States, not through supernatural intervention, but through a combination of factors that create a perfect storm of hazard. The road itself is narrow, with many sections consisting of just 2 lanes. It twists and turns through canyon country, creating blind curves where oncoming traffic can appear without warning. The hills create additional blind spots where faster traffic can crest a rise to find slower vehicles directly in their path. Much of the highway runs through remote desert with no cell phone coverage, meaning accidents can go unreported for extended periods. Emergency services average about 21 minutes to reach accident scenes, an eternity when lives hang in the balance. The human factor compounds the danger. Drivers racing between Las Vegas and Phoenix often treat the highway like a speedway, pushing their vehicles far beyond safe limits for the road conditions. Some are exhausted from partying in Las Vegas, their reaction times dulled by fatigue or lingering intoxication. Others simply zone out during the long stretches of desert, their attention wandering until it is too late to react to changing conditions. A Facebook group called US 93, aka Bloody Alley, has formed to raise awareness about the highway's dangers, sharing stories of close calls and memorializing those who have lost their lives on the road. The group's hundreds of members advocate for additional safety measures, including widening the remaining 2-lane sections to 4 lanes. But alongside the documented dangers, supernatural legends have grown around Blood Alley. Drivers report encountering phantom figures on the roadside, people who appear to be walking along the highway miles from any town or settlement. No matter how fast the approaching vehicle travels, these figures never seem to grow closer. Eventually, they simply fade from view, disappearing over a hill or into the shimmer of desert heat haze. Some have reported seeing phantom camels along the highway. This legend has a historical basis. In the mid-19th century, the United States Army experimented with using camels to transport supplies through the Southwest desert. When the experiment was abandoned, some of the animals were released into the wild and survived for years in the Arizona desert. Whether any spiritual remnants of these animals continue to walk their old paths is a matter of faith rather than evidence. Perhaps the most elaborate legend involves a phantom bus that haunts the section of highway between Wickenburg and Wickiup. The story goes that sometime in 2002, a bus carrying gamblers to casinos in Laughlin, Nevada, experienced mechanical problems in the brutal Arizona heat. The air conditioning failed, the engine began losing power, and the bus driver faced an impossible choice. According to the legend, he continued on despite the problems, and somewhere in Union Pass, disaster struck. The bus vanished, along with all its passengers. Only the driver was ever found, wandering disoriented along a roadside, searching for his bus and unable to explain what had happened. Since then, drivers on Blood Alley have reported seeing a ghost bus in their rearview mirrors, its headlights weeping what appears to be molten metal, its passengers visible as shadows behind the windows. Whether the ghosts of Blood Alley are real or simply projections of the very real terror inspired by driving one of America's deadliest highways, the deaths continue to accumulate. Memorial crosses line the roadside, marking the spots where lives ended, where journeys were cut short, where the boundary between the living and the dead became all too painfully clear. These roads exist across America, stretches of pavement where tragedy has accumulated over decades or centuries, where legends have grown from kernels of truth into towering tales of the supernatural. Whether you believe in ghosts or dismiss such stories as folklore and imagination, the documented deaths cannot be denied. Real people have lost their lives on Clinton Road and Archer Avenue, on Route 666 and Shades of Death Road. Real families have mourned loved ones who set out on journeys down Dead Man's Curve or Blood Alley and never returned. Perhaps that is the true horror of these haunted highways, not the phantom hitchhikers or spectral vehicles, but the knowledge that every legend began with genuine tragedy, with lives cut short, with grief that echoed through generations. If you find yourself traveling any of these roads, keep your eyes on the pavement and your hands on the wheel. And if you see something in your rearview mirror that should not be there, remember to like, subscribe, and share your own stories with us, because out there in the darkness, something remembers what happened here, and it may be waiting for you.